All right. So today we're going to jump right into it. Don't have much time, unfortunately. It's usually my philosophy Thursday, but today we're going to go into the anarchy part because it's usually a shorter video. Once again, 15 minutes. You know what? I'm just not going to count it. Yeah, let me count it because I already know myself. Turn on my alarm. Oh, wait. So today we're going to start with, we're going to do some anarchy with Anarchy.works. And we left off last time talking about, here we go, what exactly is anarchism? Autonomy versus and horizontality, mutual aid, voluntary association, direct action, revolution, and self-liberation. All that was great stuff. So here we go on a note on inspiration. Pluralism and freedom are not compatible with orthodox ideologies. The historical examples of anarchy do not have to be explicitly anarchist. Most of the societies and organizations that have successfully lived free of government have not called themselves anarchist. That term originated in Europe in the 19th century, and anarchism as a self conscious social movement is not nearly as universal as the desire for freedom. Indeed, that's what we're really talking about here, right? Is that freedom that so many of us claim we really desire. It is presumptuous to assign the label anarchist to people who have not chosen it. Instead, we can use a range of other terms to describe examples of anarchy in practice. Anarchy is a social situation free of government and coercive hierarchies, held together by self organized horizontal relationships. Anarchists are people who identify themselves with a social movement or philosophy of anarchism. Anti-authoritarians are people who expressly want to live in a society without coercive hierarchies. 100%. Coercive hierarchies, that's the biggest problem of all of these other structures. But do not, to the best of our knowledge, identify as anarchists. Anti-authoritarians. Interesting. I wonder what they kind of differentiate. I wonder how they differ themselves. Either because the term was not available to them, okay, obviously, or because they do not see the specifically anarchist movement as relevant to their world. Interesting. After all, the anarchist movement as such emerged from Europe, and it inherited a worldview in accordance with this background. Meanwhile, there are many other struggles against authority that spring from different worldviews and have no need to call themselves anarchists. Yeah, that's understandable. A society that exists without a state but does not identify itself as anarchist is stateless. If that society is not stateless by chance, but consciously works to prevent the emergence of hierarchies and identities with its egalitarian and identifies with its egalitarian characteristics, one might describe it as anarchinistic. Yeah, okay, I can feel that distinction. The examples in this book have been selected from a wide range of times and places, about 90 altogether. 30 are explicitly anarchist. The rest are stateless, autonomous, or consciously anti authoritarian. That's interesting. I'm excited. 90 examples. 90 examples. 30 of which are explicitly anarchist. So I'm excited to jump into these because people all the time, oh, it's not real, it's not practical, and you don't see in real life. Where do you see examples? So I'm happy to get to those examples. Besides historical, stuff that doesn't necessarily like they said, they didn't like. If you look at history, you can find plenty of examples of anarchic societies, but they don't self-proclaim to be anarchists. So I appreciate this. More than half of the examples are from present day Western society. A third are drawn from stateless societies that provide a view of the breadth of human possibility outside of Western civilization. I really appreciate that because unfortunately, in here in the states in the Western civilization, it's very, 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 very easy to be ethnocentric, to be Western centric, to kind of see things from this perspective and not really understand how life is lived outside of that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing those other perspectives and other ways of life. And the remaining few are classical historical examples. Some of these, such as the Spanish Civil War, are cited multiple times because they are well documented and offer a wealth of information. The number of examples included makes it impossible to explore each one in the detail it deserves. Ideally, the reader will be inspired to pursue these questions herself, distilling further practical lessons from the attempts of those who came before. Yeah, definitely. and I'll do that throughout. I'm probably every now and then when I come across something that sounds super interesting, might just take a long tangent and just go researching um, about it on through the video, so we can kind of learn together. It will become apparent throughout this book that anarchy exists in conflict with the state and capitalism. Ooh, that's a big thing right here because I know there's a lot of anarcho-capitalists. And today I was actually just watching I just finished the podcast with Lex Friedman and Michael Malice. Michael Malice is an amazing person, and I've seen like I think this was his third appearance on Lex Friedman's show, and he's always talking about anarchism. But in this one, it makes it clear that he seems to have a, I mean, it's not super clear, but it seems to be, that he has a anarcho-capitalist state kind of mindset because he talks a lot about the free market and how market corrections and all this other stuff. So um, I'm interested in this, and that's kind of my approach as well. I'm not gonna lie, like my idea when I first started learning about anarchy or just heard the term, I kind of thought of maybe because I'm living in America, right? I kind of thought about it as a anarcho-capitalist. It's like, oh, what would capitalism look like without, the government and without all this other stuff? Yes, I know there's exploitation problems and pollution problems and all that stuff, and I trust we're going to get into this. And what I'm curious to see is it possible to have capitalism without government or capitalism in an anarchy state? Or in an anarchic society, or is it are they really mutually exclusive, anarchy and capitalism? I'm super curious to learn that. So I guess we'll see. Many of the examples given here were ultimately crushed by police or conquering armies, and it is in large part due to the systematic repression of alternatives that there have not been more examples of anarchy working. This is a great example here because a lot of people be like, oh, it doesn't work, it just falls apart. Like, no, it doesn't just fall apart. It's a concerted effort, right, by totalitarian, authoritarian people to crush it. And people think, oh, that means that this is why we should stick with what we have now. I'm like, no, Hitler, this whole thing was trying to crush, democracy and all this other stuff. So, uh, are you saying we should have just let him do it, right? We should all, try to be like Hitler, or we should all try to, a-okay war and all this other stuff? Like, no, you have to fight against these people who want to grasp for more power. So, anyways, this bloody history implies that to be thoroughgoing and successful, an anarchist revolution would have to be global. Capitalism is a global system, constantly expanding and colonizing every autonomous society it encounters. Ooh. Mm. Capitalism is a global system, constantly expanding and colonizing every autonomous society it encounters. That's powerful. I always attribute it, like I was, you know, analyze it or liken it to a virus, to something that is just meant to grow and grow and grow, and then you talk about this viral growth, right? And just like a virus, its whole purpose is to reproduce, is to just find something else and get in there and try to reproduce itself without regard to the health of the system, the body. Some viruses might try to stick in the host for a long period of time, but many of them don't. And even if they do, it's still a more parasitic nature rather than a symbiotic one. So that's powerful. In the long run, no one community or country can remain anarchist while the rest of the world is capitalist. Yes, that's a huge thing right here that I have kind of been learning myself, is that when people say, "Oh, you can just leave America if you don't like it," I'm like, no, you can't, because even if you find something really successful, you create a really successful anarchic community somewhere else, you're gonna have these people coming in, right? These capitalistic or imperialistic or democratic government coming in, like, oh, we see you don't have democracy, right? We see you don't have this. Let's put our own thing, and it's been many examples of that happening, where you have a really successful society, the people there are happy, they're doing a good job, and then the US government comes, or any of these government systems comes under the guise of Christianity, or under the guise of capitalism or market rates or whatever, and they go in and crush that system. So that's what I'm learning as well. So that's what I'm kind of worried about. An anti-capitalist revolution must destroy capitalism totally, or else be destroyed. So certainly seems mutually exclusive. This does not mean that anarchism must be a single global system. Interesting. Many different forms of anarchist society could coexist, and these in turn could coexist with societies that were not anarchist, so long as the latter were not confrontationally authoritarian or oppressive. The following pages will show the great diversity of forms anarchy and autonomy can take. I'm excited. I am so excited about that. The examples in this book show anarchy working for a period of time or succeeding in a specific way. Until capitalism is abolished, all such examples will necessarily be partial. These examples are instructive in their weaknesses as well as their strengths. In addition to providing a picture of people creating communities and meeting their needs without bosses, they raise a question of what went wrong and how we could do better next time. To this end, here are some recurring themes that may be beneficial to reflect on in the course of reading this book. Isolation. Many anarchist projects work quite well, but only make an impact in the lives of a tiny number of people. What engenders this isolation? What tends to contribute to it? And what can offset it? Interesting. Alliances. In a number of examples, anarchists and other anti-authoritarians were betrayed by supposed allies who sabotaged the possibility of liberation in order to gain power for themselves. Why did anarchists choose these alliances, and what can we learn about what kind of alliances to make today? Ooh, that's huge. I've joined this anarchist community, and they talk about that a lot about how certain alliances are not really alliances. They're wolves in sheep clothing, things like that. So that's powerful. Repression. Autonomous communities and revolutionary activities have been stopped cold by police repression or military invasion time after time. People are intimidated, arrested, tortured, and killed, and the survivors must go into hiding or drop out of the struggle. Communities that had once provided support withdraw in order to protect themselves. What actions, strategies, and forms of organization best equip people to survive repression? How can those on the outside provide effective solidarity? That's huge right here. So yeah, I'm excited to get into how to do that, especially as from a pacifistic standpoint. um like, is violence the only answer? Can we have like a defensive driving type of thing, like a defensive society building type of thing, where you're not rolling over in the face of violence and repression, but you're also not continuing that violence? I wonder if that's possible. Collaboration. Some social movements or radical projects choose to participate in or accommodate themselves to aspects of the present system in order to overcome isolation, be accessible to a greater range of people, or avoid repression. What are the advantages and pitfalls of this approach? Are there ways to overcome isolation or avoid repression without it? Collaboration is huge. Yeah. Temporary gain. Many of the examples in this book no longer exist. Of course, anarchists are not trying to create permanent institutions that take on lives of their own. Specific organizations should come to an end when they are no longer helpful. Realizing that, how can we make the most of bubbles of autonomy while they last? And how can they continue to inform us after they have ceased to be? How can a series of temporary spaces and events be linked to create a continuity of struggle and community? Ooh, that is huge. Wow. I probably only have 2 minutes left, so I can probably continue, but I doubt I'll be able to finish all of this in 2 minutes. I don't know. I can try. We can always push it just a little bit. But yeah, that is like this stuff is huge. This is powerful stuff. So let's continue. The tricky topic of representation. In as many cases as was possible, we sought direct feedback from people with personal experience in the struggles and communities described in this book. With some examples, this was impossible due to unnavigable chasms of distance or time. In these cases, we had to rely exclusively on written representations, generally recorded by outside observers. But representation is not at all a neutral process, and outside observers project their own values and experiences onto what they're observing. Of course, representation is an inevitable activity in human discourse, and moreover, outside observers can contribute new and useful perspectives. Yeah, this is an interesting aspect. It's like many of these things are a product of their time, right? The specific time and context and everything like that. So if we look at it with our ethnocentric views and stuff like that, we kind of change and misunderstand why they did those things, and and not understand what can be translated and stuff like that. But at the same time, you know, hindsight is 2020. So looking at things from our perspective can gain us some unique, insights into the situation. So it's a push and pull, it's a compromise, and it's a balance of gaining those insights and understanding those situations. However, our world is not that simple. As European civilization spread and dominated the rest of the planet, the observers it sent out were generally the surveyors, missionaries, writers, and scientists of the ruling order. Oof. Yep. It's not like it was average people doing this. It's usually some sort of elite class who had some sort of money or influence or power. There's my time. I'm going to continue. On the world scale, this civilization is the only one with the right to interpret itself in all other cultures. Western systems of thought were forcibly spread around the world. Colonized societies were cut up and exploited as slave labor, economic resources, and ideological capital. Non Western peoples were represented back to the West in ways that would confirm the Western worldview and sense of superiority and justify the ongoing imperial project as necessary for the good of the peoples being forcibly civilized. Whoa, buddy, that is huge right there. That's the kind of nature of imperialism, of thinking that you have some objective truth, some morals, some better way of doing things, and you're gonna bestow that upon these primitives, these simple people, these uncivilized people, and it's just mm, that's huge. As anarchists trying to abolish the power structure responsible for colonialism and many other wrongs, we want to approach these other cultures in good faith in order to learn from them. But if we're not careful, we would easily fall into the accustomed Eurocentric pattern of manipulating and exploiting these other cultures for our own ideological capital. Well said. Well said. That's huge to think about. In cases where we could find no one from the community in question to review and criticize our own interpretations, we have tried to situate the storyteller and the telling, to subvert his or her objectivity and invisibility, to deliberately challenge the validity of our own information, and to propose representations that are flexible and humble. We don't know exactly how to accomplish this balancing act, but our hope is to learn while trying. Yeah, and that's something I'm learning as well. Is like admitting your bias, right? Like we have this idea, especially in Western society, that we can take an objective stance. But what that really means is that we take our biases and we hide them. We say, "Oh, we don't have a bias. Oh, we're just being objective. We just, being rational, being logical here." When in actuality, no, you have a specific way of thinking. Yeah, you have a specific experience. You have a specific, slant, and you have a specific way of seeing the world. That's just indelible in what it means to be human, right? To have our own brains and everything like that. You're not a machine, and even machines that we create, they're things that we create. We put data into them. We put our ideas into them. So when we're doing science or exploring ideas of other cultures, we're always doing that from some sort of bias. So it's more important to admit those biases, that says to say these are assumptions, these, to try and find your biases, to try and be as clear and as real as possible that you have a bias, that you have an assumption, and then go in there and try to learn things. Because at least then, when you're admitting that you're coming from a Western view, a certain type of view, then you're also admitting that you might be wrong, that your interpretation might be wrong, by that your understanding might be wrong. And that keeps you humble, that keeps you open to new ways of learning and new information that might come up. When you have these biases and you claim you're objective, what you're really doing is making it far more likely that you're just going to erase most of the stuff, or that you're just going to imperialize it, right? You're going to colonize it. You're going to put your own sense of morals or your own sense of um, knowledge and way of thinking onto somebody else's perspective, somebody else's culture. And from that, you won't be able to learn as much. We see that way too often. So yeah, this is super important here. and they admit it. Like it's a balancing act. They don't know how to do it, but it's the dialectic, as Hegel will say. As Hegel will say, it's the practice of doing so. It's the action of thinking, of having that realization that you don't know, but you can try, right? You can the praxis. You can get into the exercise of it. You can exercise your brain, just like you would exercise your muscles in order to figure it out, at least to try. So, anyways, some indigenous people, whom we consider comrades in the struggle against authority, feel that white people have no right to represent indigenous cultures. Oof. And this position is especially justified given that for 500 years, Euro American representations of indigenous peoples have been self serving, exploitative, and connected to ongoing processes of genocide and colonization. Yep. And on the other hand, part of our goal in publishing this book has been to challenge the historical Eurocentrism of the anarchist movement and encourage ourselves to be open to other cultures. We could not do this by only presenting stories of statelessness from our own culture. The author and most of the people working on this book in an editorial capacity are white. And it is no surprise that what we write reflects our backgrounds. In fact, the central question this book seeks to address, whether anarchy could work, seems itself to be Eurocentric. Only people who have obliterated the memory of their own stateless past could ask themselves whether they need the state. That right there is so meta. Like that's the problem here. Like in Western society, the question whether or not anarchy works is Eurocentric itself because our culture, and this even counts for me because I'm living here, right? I was born here, even though I have some ideas of Haitian culture and some African, because of my history, or rather my education of my history, right? This is not automatic. I didn't just grow up knowing this stuff. I sought it out, right? But anyways, like we in America and many of these Western cultures, we grew up, we're indoctrinated into this idea that you have a state, right? You have a government, you have some authority, a coercive authority, and we're raised to think that this is normal, think that this is the natural or best state of humanity, that this is the best we can ask for, this is whatever, right? And so in other places where that might be their daily life, right, of anarchy, of not having a ruler, a government, a culture, a religion, whatever, that's telling them everything what to do, they wouldn't even think to ask that because that's just their day of life. That's like asking, does drinking water benefit you? I was like, well, obviously, like you would only ask that if you don't drink water regularly, or or if you're trying to understand how water benefits you. It's like it's inherently biased question to even ask whether or not anarchy works. So it's not even, you can't even take an objective stance and say, oh, we're just trying to see if anarchy works. You're already biased by the dint of you asking that question in the first place. So yeah, this is powerful. That's huge. Goodness, I love it. Where was I? We recognize that not everyone shares this historical blind spot, and that what we publish here may not be useful for people from other backgrounds. But we hope that by telling stories of the cultures and struggles of other societies, we can help correct the Eurocentrism endemic to some of our communities and become better allies and better listeners, whenever people from other cultures choose to tell us their own stories. Someone who read over this text pointed out to us that reciprocity is a fundamental value of indigenous worldviews. Yes. The question he posed to us was, if anarchists who are mostly Euro American are going to take lessons from indigenous or other communities, cultures, and nations, what will we offer in return? I hope that wherever possible, we offer solidarity, widening the struggle and supporting other peoples who struggle against authority without calling themselves anarchists. After all, if we are inspired by certain other societies, shouldn't we do more to recognize and aid their ongoing struggles? Linda T. Smith's book, Decolonizing Methodologies, Research in Indigenous Peoples, London Zed Books, 1999, offers an important perspective on some of these themes. Ooh, that's some huge stuff. So we're gonna get into the rest later. Might look up some of this stuff in the meantime. But yeah, this was great. I hope you learned from this as much as I did this time. And again, go check out this Anarchy Works, just Anarchy.works, and read it yourself. Take your own time with it. Do the dialectic. Have fun with it. This is huge. I think this is going to be the biggest move of our time. Hopefully, right? Everything is going to be contingent upon this, because otherwise, all these technological advances we're doing is just gonna be the same old, right? It's just gonna accelerate the same problems and the same issues, the same thing. But we're not going to be solving any problems if we don't look at the fundamental nature of our society, of our civilization, and really question how it works and why it works and what's broken and why it's broken. And look at examples outside of our cultures and see, what can we learn from them? And like they said, accept that it works for them and see why it works. See what we can do, what we can learn from them. And then, and as reciprocity, stop taking their shit. Like, stop colonizing, stop exploiting them, stop criminalizing them, stop demonizing them and all this stuff. Like, just get out their way. Let them live their lives, and we can learn from them, but let's try to step back away from trying to run over there and give them democracy, give them Christianity, give them economy, give them capitalism. Like, no, clearly something has been working for them. So let's step back and learn from them. And in turn, maybe they can learn what not to do from us. uh, but yeah, there's a lot. Don't get me wrong. Of course, we have some good stuff here. Don't get me wrong, of course. But like, there's a lot we need to learn in America and Western culture. And I hope, you know, more people read books like this to learn that stuff, to open our eyes and open our minds to that sort of thing. So yeah, as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Have a great day. See you. Bye bye.